Hello, today I will be going over with you an overview unit of Transcendentalist poetry. And the purpose in this is to go ahead and introduce students to the thoughts of two very prominent authors. I would first ask those students when they came in if they could tell me who these two individuals were. For the unit, I would like for students to be able to come away with the knowledge that they would be exposed to the ideology of Transcendentalist thought, which during the time period of the mid-19th century would be those focused on ideas in nature. And the poems of Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman will be stressed, but also, in addition, their personal lives and how their personal lives were affected by their poetry. And students will be responsible for expressing themselves by creating an emotion poem. They will have a template to do this, and then they will be collaborating with their peers on the evolution of their poem. I'm hoping that students will be able to draw some similarities across literature, not only by just Dickinson and Whitman and the current themes that they possess, but also in sharing a theme of their own poetry and how they can relate that to their classmates. In knowing the structure of the classroom, this is an 11th grade basic English 3 class. One of the benefits to this class is it is a co-taught class by an English teacher and the special ed English teacher. There's a small ratio of students to teachers, so just 12 students, 4 girls and 8 boys, and 4 of those students do possess an IEP. The school structure is a low-income rural school district, and their prior knowledge of poetry is limited, but they have been exposed to this in the past. Their reading levels range from 6th grade to 10th grade. There will be times when students are given more classwork time, perhaps, than other classes due to the limited parental involvement in academics. This structure gives them time to ask questions, collaborate with their peers if they have questions. And in learning, I found that the visual and kinesthetic learning styles together seem to be the best fit for these students. I have chosen 6 standards that I would like to focus on in this unit. The most important, I believe, are the first 2, which I would like students to be able to cite strong and thorough textual evidence, so that when they're explaining what theme is related in what poem, they can back up their assumptions with evidence from the text, and that forms a much stronger argument. As this poetry unit will be introduced before their research paper begins, I believe this is also another way to help strengthen their skills in proving and using persuasive language with knowledge that can be backed up beforehand. I also think it's very important that they learn about figurative and connotative meanings in their literature and how these word choices have an impact on the poem, why perhaps an author would use one word over another, whether it has to do with a rhyme scheme that Emily Dickinson uses, or whether it's free verse that Walt Whitman uses. I would like them to be exposed to the 19th century works of American literature, and they will have a chance to compare the themes with 2 different authors. For the technology component, I would like them to be able to share their information in the emotion poem with each other so that they can collaboratively work on it, and then they're able to convey a vivid picture of what their poem should be, and then also get immediate feedback from their peers on that. In doing this, they will be able to prove their acquisition of knowledge through daily comprehension written assignments. I will be assessing them on their verbal communication daily when we are going through the themes and the various aspects of the literary terms. They will be responsible for updating the KWL chart, which we will do on an almost daily basis through the Google Chromebooks. And then in transposing their ideas to text and sharing that will be assessed through their emotion poems and then the collaboration with their peers on this project. I think for the teaching and learning strategies, something that's very important, Brewer's Thinker Tools, which I know lends itself to the science field. However, in this instance, I believe that in poetry, the students have to dissect a poem by its individual parts, and students can learn and compartmentalize the different designs of poetry in this way. In Brewer's 4 steps, the first is to motivate, and students are going to be shown something that they can relate to. In this instance, a parallel will be drawn between something they already know, which would be songs, and then something in which they can relate to poetry itself. I will have them listen to a song with a vague monologue, so it's not quite so easy to determine the theme of this song. However, they may, from first listening to it, all be able to come up with a similar theme. Then I would like the students to discuss their predictions, and then they might feel more comfortable in sharing their reasoning, and this will build on poetry knowledge. After I go through this initial immersion, in modeling evolution, I would like the students to have their literary terms and definitions, and they will have a chance to apply this knowledge in an area where both teachers are facilitating answers and explanations. In the formalization phase, they will be able to collaborate with their peers in building a shared learning context. So not only are they going to come up with an explanation, but they'll explain and justify their reasoning, and their peers will be able to help them if they also have something to add as well. In the final phase of transfer, they'll be creating something of their own that makes sense and uses the knowledge that they have acquired. In this way, I believe that in showing their understanding of the literary techniques, that they will show me better than any multiple choice or small written assignment their growth and understanding, because they are actually creating something from this knowledge. The technologies we used will include, obviously, any type of Google Classroom, Doc, and Slide. Students will have access daily to Chromebooks. The smartboard will be on in order to facilitate the visual aspect of the lesson, and the internet will be used for video and song clips. To begin the day 1 of the unit, a literary term handout would be used, and the KWL chart would be on the board discussing what students already know about poetry, the literary terms, and the Transcendentalist thought of the time. I will play a song clip of All I Want Is Everything. On here I would have a link in order to take students to this, and we would listen to this out loud in class and then compare the themes that they believe according to the song's actual meaning. In the handout 1, I will assign them for the right-hand column these literary terms that I wish for them to define. They can find these in their book, they could find these on the internet, but ultimately they'll have a base for starting the day 2 of the unit when we continue the next day. So, as I said, we'll open up with these literary terms, and then once everyone has those, I'll ask them to put them into their own words as a class so that they're able to understand, not just based on the definition, but if they were given an example, they could tell me which literary term it would be. Next, they would read Emily Dickinson's biography and take a short answer quiz on these literary terms. For the assignment, I would give them 4 of Emily Dickinson's poems, and then they would be responsible for completing the first part of handout 2. Now, in handout 2, I do have a Venn diagram for them in which they're annotating the parts of the poem, and they're including parts of Emily Dickinson's private life and then something that she might include on Facebook. So according to this poem, does she believe in the concept of Facebook, or is she against it? And again, this is something that I'm hoping students have a vast knowledge of Facebook, so they would be able to take a literary poem and be able to tell based on that, is that something that she would agree with? So hopefully bringing something that's old in their lives to a new concept, they would be more easily able to accept that and add that to their knowledge base. On day 3, after we're discussing this Venn diagram, they will be asked to provide support from the text. Why do you believe this to be the case? Then, in transitioning, students will be directed to the biography of Walt Whitman in their textbook, and they should be reading over 2 different poems for tomorrow's discussion. They will have a bit of time in class to go to their Google Classroom page, and in this, I have given them a link to the Walt Whitman poem, here, The Song of Myself, and they would scroll through this poem and find 4 lines that make up one stanza that particularly relates to something that they feel moved them. The mood of the poem, the way it was written, and then they are responsible for memorizing those 4 lines in which to report back on day 5. The next day, the class will open up with reviewing those assigned poems and talking about the themes of the American spirit, nationalism, and everyday American life. I will put them in small groups and ask them to compare and contrast Whitman and Dickinson's theme and style. And then they will be given 15 minutes to work on their emotion poems in their Chromebooks. In case they have any questions, they can be facilitated by the teacher. Finally, on day 5, we will go through a reading of "O Captain, My Captain," and in which I will also, after they have read it, give them a chance to listen to it here so that they can process the meaning.
My captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring.
I'm also hoping that once students hear how the poem is read, they can also learn to express emotion in their tone as they're reading their own poems. So they will stand and recite their 4-line stanza and give their interpretation. In response, their peers will agree and add to the support of this analysis. Finally, at the end of the day, we will use the KWL chart to go ahead and fill out any additional information the students feel that they have learned. In following up on the last day, they will submit their emotion poem to me on Google Classroom. From there, I will create a community Google slide in which each student will change the background color of their emotion poem to fit the mood, and then these will be shared at the end of the assessment on the smartboard. Again, copies of sample student handouts that I will be using, as well as the creation of the emotion poem in which I give them a template, as well as an example here. A student sample of the emotion poem could be here, in which they utilize alliteration, they're using similes throughout, they're using words that would draw you into their emotion. I believe that augmentation is what would be used most, because they could do this project without the use of the internet and their Chromebooks. However, I think with the medium of technology, they're allowed to collaborate better and they're able to focus on what they want to say and share it with their peers more easily. In their homework, they would have short answer questions, verbal responses I would check in class. Their emotion poem would be the cornerstone of this unit, and along with reciting the stanza, I believe all of these will help in adjusting and hopefully strengthening their understanding of poetry as a whole. And so I thank you for listening to my Transcendentalist Poetry unit, and I look forward to teaching it very shortly.